Welcome to Corrective Consciousness, episode 124, the podcast where we explore the inanity of pop culture. I'm your host, vysethebold, and this is...
Lotus Prince.
And OldManStompy.
And we have another really great themed show here. We will be talking about my experiences as a young boy. And
Did your father take you to the city?
To see the Black Parade.
I thought it was join the Black Parade. I can't remember.
Whatever. It's not worth. It's not worth being accurate with that song.
We were doing so well, though. I think we should keep going. Did he carry you home?
Yes. Na 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 na. Oh wait, no, different song. Anyway,
it's quite different.
So actually, our theme this episode is I actually wanted to explore this because it's pretty normal for a movie to be adapted from a novel or a similar type of material, but it is actually quite rare to see a video game adapt a book, and even more directly. So I wanted to explore this topic a little bit because I find it fascinating because, there's usually not much action happening in a book unless it's very specifically like that. Technically, even James Bond video games are based off of James Bond novels, very loosely.
Well, they're based on the movies.
Yeah, and the movies really aren't based off the books, really, at all.
The first few really were. Some of them were quite accurate, but as it went on, Perry told me that Octopussy was supposed to be about someone who knew that James Bond was coming for him, and he's like, "Oh shit, oh fuck," and that there's nothing that even references that in the movie, just not even close. There's a woman who's called Octopussy in the movie. It's all right.
Yeah, a lot of the movies really diverged. It kind of went back with Casino Royale. It's actually pretty damn accurate, except for the fact that they made the bad guy much more effective than in the novel. The novel, he was just a putz.
Also, they changed Baccarat to poker to make it more palatable to Americans, I think.
Well, to make it more palatable to modern audiences, not only just to Americans, but most of the world knows how to play poker at this point because of the World Series of Poker. It's a popular game all over the world now. So very few people know what Baccarat is, and even though it's actually not all that different than blackjack, it's actually pretty close. You actually learn how to play the game when you read the book. They tell you the rules.
Nice.
But anyway, very loosely, and I actually find it so very fascinating, the drift of these titles. One of our favorites. We all pretty much love the Castlevania series, and it is ostensibly based off of Universal monster movies in general.
Yes. Yeah.
But and also Hammer horror movies, I should say, as well. That's where Alucard comes from.
That
Alucard.
was Hammer, really? Son of Dracula?
The name Alucard specifically comes from a Hammer Dracula film with what's his name from Lord of the Rings in it.
Christopher Lee.
What's that?
Christopher Lee.
Christopher Lee. Yeah.
Well, no. Even then, I thought there was a black and white Son of Dracula movie where someone sees the name Alucard and they're like, "Wait a minute."
That is such a B movie thing.
I know, it's Nobog is goblin backward. It really was.
But also the dawning moment of realization where the hero takes the entire movie to figure out that Alucard is Dracula backwards.
I know. But that was definitely a black and white movie, and Hammer was from the 70s, wasn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it was still. I think Alucard was still Universal.
Oh, Count Alucard is from Son of Dracula in the in the Universal era. You're right. Portrayed by Lon Chaney Jr.
Oh, it was Lon Chaney, nice.
But I believe he shows up in the Hammer movies as well.
Okay, that I did not know.
So yes, but anyway, Yeah, and then Alucard shows up as actually just Dracula in Helsing. But anyway.
Yep. I mean, well, that was an alias and not like a guy named Alucard.
Yeah, but anyway,
Very subtle, by the way.
Uh, it was very clear that these games were very much based off of the movie incarnations. Dracula was it was kind of accurate. It was much more accurate, let's say, than Frankenstein, for instance.
What, you mean the movie?
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, so, the movie still took quite a few liberties, but
sure.
Yeah, Frankenstein was way off.
Well, it's way off because I don't know if you knew about this, but Frankenstein, the Universal movie, was based off of a play. And that play portrayed Frankenstein and the monster that way. Yeah,
because I read the book, and like not even close.
Nope.
Except that there's a guy named Frankenstein in it.
I mean, if you're gonna go for accuracy, Bram Stoker's Dracula by Francis Ford Coppola is a lot better, but it's still not exactly.
Was that the one with Keanu Reeves and Gary Oldman?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Again, there were liberties, but it was more
closer.
accurate than others. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, it was very clear that they were based off the movies, just mainly because of the window dressings. I mean, when you first begin Castlevania, it shows a film reel. It very much
I think
the credits
too. Yeah.
Yeah, the credits are all reference to all of these people we're talking about, like Lon Chaney Jr. and Bela Lugosi and basically spoof versions of their names.
Yeah.
But as time went on, they more brought the Belmonts into the original Dracula story, particularly in Castlevania Bloodlines, where you actually play the son of one of the characters in Dracula. And then they bring it in. There's a lot of horror and movie references in the series in general. But I also find it fascinating that you have a character, essentially window dressings of these books within these own worlds that these creators have made, just as pretty much references. So I mean, as time went on, they made Dracula more of a sympathetic character, which he was kind of supposed to be in the book.
No, he really wasn't.
I mean,
he was trying to like invade and assimilate into society.
Yeah, but you feel bad for him because of his backstory, I guess.
Did he have a backstory in the book? I actually kind of don't remember that.
Maybe I'm.
I'm pretty sure he was just a bad guy
it.
in the book. Like, there's a creepy as shit part where, you see like John Harker's in Dracula's castle, and he sees a bag, like a big sack on the floor that's like moving a little bit. It's like the beginning of Resident Evil 5. He's just like, wow, that's creepy. And then like in a later scene in the book, there's this woman frantically pounding on the front door of the castle asking where her child is, and you're like, whoa. Like it's creepy. Like for a 19th century book, that's actually creepy.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure. I mean, I only read the book in high school, so it's been a long time. But I'm pretty sure there was no backstory, and Dracula's a bad guy.
Okay, well, fair enough. But I guess it's interesting, that they even tried to bring it into the book.
Yeah.
So, but. I think the funniest one really is Dante's Inferno. I don't know if you guys played this.
Oh, I've played the game.
Okay, you played the game.
The game's fucking gorgeous, by the way, but like everything is wrong.
I took an entire course on the Divine Comedy.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, you would know.
I've read all 3 books.
Yep. So have I, but I mean, I didn't get the course treatment though.
Yeah, but it's supposed to be a parody of modern religion at the time.
Yes.
That's why it's called the Divine Comedy, but it's not funny to anybody now because you don't know what they're referencing.
Yeah, that's like he's taking a tour through hell. Like, this is dark, but like what you didn't realize is that like the then current pope was like in hell being tortured. Like, that would be like if you had, like, the president today, although I'm sure some people have already thought of that. But, like, I mean, he was doing it back then this is back when the church would have no problem just killing your ass. So it was like,
he got excommunicated because of this.
Yeah.
This book. Like he couldn't return home because of it.
Yeah.
Which is a big deal. A big deal. You can't go home. You lose your LA privileges, so to speak. But he so it's just really funny that they make Dante, who's supposed to be, a poet, into a warrior against hell, when he's really just supposed to be going through hell to learn from it.
He was wandering through the woods, and he was lost and confused, and a she-wolf attacked him, and he was like, oh my god, and then Virgil shows up, and he walks him to the gates of hell, and they literally tore hell. Or, Death comes for him and he kills Death and he takes his side. That's fine.
Well, he also is looking for his girlfriend who is in heaven.
Yes.
I believe. So that's actually the whole point.
Or Satan captured her and he has to save her. That's fine too.
But no, the whole point is that he needs to learn how to be a pious human in order to progress to be with his girlfriend who's in heaven. So, going to hell, he's going to hell to learn from it, not to battle it.
Yeah, you are fighting your way through hell to save your girlfriend from Satan. It's my favorite comment I've ever seen on this thing was, how Dante's Inferno came out with how some games get cute with their special editions and they call them the Hyper Fighting Edition or this was the Divine Edition, but what was funny was that it came with a digital an E version of the actual Dante's Inferno. I don't think it was the whole Divine Comedy. I think it was just the Inferno.
Yeah, just the Inferno.
But my favorite comment about that was people who saw that this version existed, they're like, oh cool, so now you can see firsthand how badly the game butchers the source material.
This was the game that famously they sent a cake that was just straight up body parts in fondant, fondant form to the EGM offices or the 1UP offices at the time, and it was just straight up disgusting looking. Nobody wanted to eat it because it was a cake in the shape of human remains and very realistic looking. And this is in such bad taste.
Yeah, that
is. Dante's Inferno is supposed to be a cautionary tale.
Not to mention, as horrific as the punishments were, it never went into that grisly detail, and not only that, but they were poetic justice punishments. It wasn't just evisceration.
Yeah, for sure. And there's plenty of other ones that I wanted to mention. I mean, a lot of these ended up becoming video games because they became media franchises in general. There are plenty of Harry Potter games and stuff like that.
Oh, there's a bunch, and all sorts of different types too.
And they have almost nothing to do with the actual books, really. I mean,
the original games kind of did, but some of them where it's the PS3 one where it's a shooter, basically it's a shooter. It's I
was gonna say I think the Deathly Hallows one ends up being Gears of War, only with wands.
Yeah, and it was there was a battle, but dude. I would say the Lego Harry Potter books. It's books, the games. It's really any Lego game. Yes, the scenes they show are pretty accurate with comedic twists, but you really have to have seen the movie to actually understand them.
Yeah, for sure. Now, here is maybe a controversial opinion, but I think The Wizard of Oz has had a couple adaptations, and most of them are kind of more referencing the movie as much as they can without getting sued.
Well, those are the Super Nintendo platformers, right?
Well, there is one like that, but
and there's a 3DS game, I think.
There's a regular DS one, and that is actually what I'm going to allude to. Okay. Now, I don't like this game in general because it has a weird control scheme. It has a trackball-like control scheme that you need to use the bottom of the bottom screen and the stylus for in order to move around. But the concept is actually kind of cool, and I can see why you would want to make an RPG out of Wizard of Oz, because it's really kind of a road movie when you think about it, because she's gathering her party in order to in order to get to the end, right?
I don't know how far the game goes, but if you keep reading the books, there is absolutely an expanded universe going on.
Yeah, so I actually am totally in favor of them making an RPG series based off of the Wizard of Oz. I think it makes perfect sense.
Dude, you could make that work. And by the way, did you ever see the creepy 1980s movie Return to Oz?
You know what? With Fairuza Balk? No, I've never actually seen that one.
Because that is, again, it took some liberties, but it is a surprisingly faithful adaptation of books 2 and 3.
That's what I hear.
I mean, there's the whole beginning where Dorothy was at a mental asylum because, like, Oz wasn't real, but, like, in the book, it was, like, the movie did the whole, it was a dream angle, but in the book, it was obviously real, and she eventually brings in Auntie Em and Uncle Henry to Oz. Like, there's even a really surreal part where, like, Uncle Henry had to build a new house, and eventually they go to Oz, and they see where, like, the old house had fallen, and they're like, huh. Like, it's pretty interesting.
Mm-hmm. I actually think this is a really good world for a video game. I mean, there's not much fighting going on in Wizard of Oz, but I don't know how
bad guys.
But there are a lot of cool bad guys. I mean, there's even your rank and file bad guys too that are easily duplicated. You have flying monkeys, you have the guards, and you have.
And Vice, all the munchkins you might not know about kick. These, but the Wheelers. Do you know about the Wheelers?
No, I don't know about the Wheelers.
Oh my fucking god! Oh my god! Like when you're ready, go to YouTube. Go to Return to Oz Wheelers. They're like lots of people who have seen Return to Oz bring up how creepy that movie was, because you know how 80s movies had no problem like scaring children. Like there'd always be like a part where it's like, oh Jesus. Return to Oz, there were like 2 big scare scenes, and one of them was the Wheelers, and it wasn't like jump scare, it's just they look creepy, and they looked surprisingly accurate to the book's illustrations. Like, they're creepy. Like, you first see graffiti on the walls, like, beware the Wheelers, and you're like, huh? And then they show up and they're actually scary, and you're like, okay. Look them up, it's kind of amazing.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And then we have kind of going with the same kind of theme and era. You have Alice in Wonderland.
Oh yeah.
So Alice in Wonderland's been done in a few different ways, but you of course are famous for loving a particular version of Alice, right?
Yeah, it was the Alice's Adventures in Wonderland on the CDI, I believe. No, it was.
Boy, I would love to watch you play this and be like, oh yeah, so this is the predecessor to the American McGee's Alice.
Yeah. Well, no, American McGee's Alice is like just a twisted take on Alice in Wonderland, where actually canonically in this game, Alice does go to a mental asylum because the opening movie of the game has her, like, it alludes to her, and they address this later more directly, but she was just playing with her imaginary friends in Wonderland while her house was on fire because, like, the cat had knocked over a candle or something and, like, nobody noticed. So, like, her whole family died, and she just magically happens not to be affected by it. She got out in time, but everyone else died, so she went to a mental asylum. So, Wonderland was always in her head, but now she's, like, fucked up with PTSD and, like, survivor's guilt. So Wonderland is fucked up. It's actually a really good premise for a story. So everything's all dark and twisted in it, and it like, when Tim Burton was going to make the Alice in Wonderland movie, everyone was like, you could not have possibly picked a better director for this, because American McGee's Alice, like, is a Tim Burton movie. The movie ended up being, like, quite different, but, like, if you ever look at American McGee's Alice, you can totally see, like, if you didn't know any better, you would have thought Tim Burton made it and not American McGee, if you didn't know who American McGee was.
It was definitely done in his style, for sure.
And by the way, there was actually going to be an American McGee's Oz. It didn't get off the ground, but a couple of sample screenshots were released, and it basically looked like green American McGee's Alice, and I was okay with that.
Yeah. I actually love the concept of making a sequel to a book and being accurate in the references. So
Yeah.
this is a cool way to do it, and not only that, but like an inventive way to do it. I mean,
Yeah.
you don't have to do a straight up adaptation, where you try to shoehorn, video game mechanics like killing, constant killing of enemies and things like that, into a setting that doesn't call for it.
Well, that's the thing. Like with Wizard of Oz, I could see it more as a point-and-click adventure game with RPG
Sure.
elements than an actual RPG. But with American McGee's Alice, it's like, hey, guess what? Alice's head's fucked up, Wonderland's fucked up, everything wants her dead, now you can kill stuff. Like, okay,
Yeah.
alright, we're doing it. And he even
So-
brought in other Lewis Carroll characters. Like, he brought Boojums from, I actually forgot what the poem was called. He brought in the Jabberwock, which...
Oh, the hunting of the Snark, right?
Oh, okay, thank you. That's right. It's like we're looking for snarks, but watch out for boojums. Speaking of which, snarks are also enemies. They're like fish in that game. The Jabberwock is there because in Through the Looking Glass, Alice and Humpty Dumpty have a discussion about what the hell the Jabberwock means because that poem is hard to understand. And speaking of which, Humpty Dumpty even shows up. He doesn't talk, but he's around, and he looks all grumbly.
Yes, he is around.
The funny thing is, Humpty Dumpty's actually like a real jerk in the actual Through the Looking Glass. He's just a jerk. He's really full of himself and has like the darkest line in like the entire 2 books where he like alludes that Alice like should kill herself.
Oh, wow.
Like there's some line where it's like Alice says like, growing old is like that's not for me. I wish I could stop at 10. And Humpty Dumpty's like, well, one person can't do that, but 2 might. And it's just like, Jesus. And Alice like immediately changes the subject. It's like, thanks, asshole.
So, like, wasn't the whole, like, Alice in Wonderland novel series, like, a couple of them, like, they stem from Lewis Carroll's frustration with modern pedagogy at the time?
That's what I'd heard about, like math
really
and whatever.
frustrating teaching sequences.
Yeah, well, I'd heard that, like, there was also the concept of imaginary numbers becoming more, like, acceptable. And he's like, you want a bunch of bullshit? I'll write a bunch of bullshit. And he did.
So you know what's pretty funny about Humpty Dumpty is he's never described as an egg in
that's true.
In the poem.
That's true.
It's just Humpty Dumpty that sat on a wall. Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. I mean, there's no description of him at all.
Yeah, I forgot what it was, but I think I'd read somewhere Humpty Dumpty might have been like a bell or something, or like some inanimate object that was. Oh no, it might have been like a cannon. Like, I think it was something weird, like some old like inanimate object. I don't think it was a person. I forgot what it actually was, but like I think there is an explanation for it somewhere.
Some people are thinking of that it's King Richard III of England.
Actually, a person, really?
Yeah, because all of the king's horses and all the king's men
okay,
are trying to put him back together again.
Gotcha.
So a lot of that stuff, people made allusions to things, but weren't direct in.
Well, yeah, because they'd be like
chastising
or like yeah.
Yeah,
like...
exactly. So in their parody, but I just always found it interesting that he's always portrayed like I guess maybe as a tradition, as an egg, but he isn't one.
Yeah, and he's an egg in Alice as well.
Yeah. He's just traditionally one for some reason.
Yeah.
So
I just love how easily frustrated he gets. It's actually kind of funny.
So you know this one a little bit better. I actually bought the book for this, but never read it. But the book is kind of or the video game is almost like a semi-sequel to the book Parasite Eve.
It is.
Okay.
Yeah, like Parasite Eve, the video game, is a sequel to Parasite Eve, the book. It's actually really interesting because you might not notice it if you just play the game, but like if you've read the book, there's like a scene where like you're talking about what's happening with this mitochondria monster that's like attacking stuff, and like this takes place in New York City, and there's this one Japanese guy who speaks in like very broken English who shows up to New York, and he's trying to help out, and he's like, yeah, we had something like this happen in Japan a while back, and it's like, oh, because
he's the one that's mystified that you could buy guns easily in United States.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny too. There's this one scene where he's trying to ask some cops for help, and a bunch of them were like, learn English, asshole, and one guy is like, dude, come on, like, I think I know a little Japanese, let me try working on something, and then, like, nothing in canon really necessarily made this happen, but you know this was the game designer having fun, like, because you know how people are spontaneously combusting, like, the douchebag cops, like, spontaneously combust by the end of the scene, and then the nice cop, like, doesn't, and it's
wow.
Oh, well, there you go, should have helped out the Japanese guy, he was just trying to ask for directions or whatever.
Wow.
But yeah, Parasite Eve is, like, I put this in the show notes tentatively. It's not an adaptation, it's a sequel, but it definitely was inspired by the book. The book is interesting because, I mean, it's a somewhat similar plot to the game. Like, there's this mitochondria monster that's becoming conscious and all-powerful, and it wants a body and everything. But the author, I believe, was a surgeon. So there are a lot of scenes in hospitals where he's writing about, like, surgical scenes taking place, and it's kind of funny because it's in detail that, like, made me a little queasy. Like, you might find a little much, but he's not writing it to be gory. This is just shit that you would see as a surgeon. So it was, like, very matter of fact. And he's also using terminology that, like, you can understand, but it sounds like shop talk. It's just kind of funny. It, like, carries over into the book.
Nice. Well, there are quite a few other ones that I want to go over, but I think there are some unusual ones that I wanted to point out that a lot of people may not realize. So Shin Megami Tensei is actually based off of a book series. The original games in the series are based off of this. The game dating all the way back to the Famicom. So before Shin Megami Tensei, there was the Megami Tensei series.
Yeah.
Shin meaning new or renewal of an idea, but those games were based off of a book called Megami Tensei, where I believe it was a story about computers and students and the demons being summoned within. So really the start and the genesis of those ideas. But of course, it's gone off to its own life in the SMT series and Persona series as well, and really has its own life. But the idea of mixing technology and demons and school aged kids was definitely a thing that was invented for that novel series. I believe the first novel, at least, is fan translated on a website right now, and you can go and read it, which is actually kind of cool.
And by the way, real quick, regarding, like, material you might not have known about, like, we already talked about American McGee's Alice. He also released, I believe it's a free-to-play game where you could, like, pay for perks and stuff, I think, on Steam, called Akanero. And it's like a Japanese, like, how do I phrase this? It's like that, like the Japanese art style with like the old timey pictures of like samurai, like that kind of style for like Little Red Riding Hood. I actually haven't played it, but it's like Little Red Riding Hood with a very like old timey Japanese aesthetic, which is kind of cool.
I think they're called etchings, or
it might have been. I mean, it wasn't etched. They're like their paintings, but I know what you mean.
Maybe they're wood block paintings. It
might have been. Yeah. It might have been, but I think it kind of has. It's not full on that look, but I think it was influenced by that look.
Sure.
So that's just a thing I want to throw out real quick. And I guess also American McGee's Grimm. I've mentioned this briefly in the podcast before, but it's just, let's take these bunch of Grimm's fairy tales and like make everything more mean-spirited. That's the point of the game. It plays almost like reverse Katamari, where you're not building you're not building a bigger and bigger ball, but you're running around and spreading darkness, and the more darkness you spread, like once you've corrupted X% of the level, you are able to corrupt stuff that you couldn't before, like your corruption levels up. So you want to ruin as much stuff as you can. The game's okay, but it's kind of cool to see all those fairy tales again.
Nice. I believe OldManStompy brought up this one, the Hitchhiker's Guide text adventure.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I thought this was particularly funny. I haven't actually played it myself, but
I have.
I've heard that Douglas Adams is definitely on the Sierra side of game design, where
no,
like he describes some of his games like that, and the Starship Titanic as like user mendacious, in the sense that like the game is actively sort of working against you.
This is coming from the author that invented an entire planet of beings that have so much bureaucracy they can't really do anything.
So, like, isn't there like a mechanic in the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy game where like an item can randomly spawn in your inventory called like that thing that your aunt gave you that you don't know what it is?
Nice.
And since it's partially an inventory management puzzle, this can make the game unwinnable.
Oh no.
So the big thing is that a very useless item in the very beginning of the game is actually one of the items that's needed to beat the rest of the game, and if you discard it, you are fucked, and it is pocket lint.
That is absolutely Sierra logic right there.
Yeah. So
old Sierra.
The way that you're supposed to get that it is an important item is that they replicated it as a feelie. There is actually pocket lint that they gave you in the box of the game. So you're supposed to recognize that the pocket lint is something important then. But
I wonder how they'd replicate that in a digital re-release. Would it like have a picture of pocket lint, or like make your pocket extra linty if you played it on your phone?
Perfect. No, actually, by the way, speaking of the fairy tale stuff from before, and speaking of Sierra, the King's Quest games are not adapted from books, but there's heavy allusions to fairy tales in most of them.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Like, King's Quest 1 is like Rumpelstiltskin, and just a dragon, because all sorts of European stories have killing dragons. King's Quest 2 has... What was it?
And the Batmobile.
That was that cameoed in King's Quest 2.
Really?
It did, yeah. Like, if you kept going back and forth on a screen, there's a chance you might see the Adam of West Batmobile just drive around real quick. And it's just like, thanks. It's just like a little Easter egg kind of thing. I don't remember if King's Quest 2 had specific fairy tale references, but there was definitely, like, a mermaid underwater. There was a flying carpet. King's Quest 5 had Beauty and the Beast, like, just straight up. So there's a bunch of that stuff going on. King's Quest 7 had Chicken Little. Not a grim fairy tale, of course, but lots of like stuff that you might recognize, which is kind of amusing.
Nice.
Oh, actually, one more thing for fairy tales. Have you guys ever heard of The Path?
So that's a Little Red Riding Hood centered game, right?
I've heard of it. I haven't actually played it yet.
This is one of those games where like you'd better know what you're buying, because it doesn't really feel like a video game that you beat. Like, oh, I beat it. But the basic idea is you need to walk to Grandma's house, and if you stay on the path, then you make it to Grandma's house, and you get like a low ranking or whatever. The point of the game is you're supposed to walk off the path and encounter weird stuff. But like the game is like an allegory to like adolescence and maturity. Like if Red Riding Hood, because there are 5, I actually really like this. There are 5 different Red Riding Hoods you could play as, and they all have red names. Like there's Ginger, there's Carmen, there's Scarlet. If you play as Red Riding Hood, who's like the little girl from the fairy tale, then the big thing she encounters will be like the wolf. And so there's that. But if you play as one of the older Reds, then you might encounter like a lumberjack or whatever, who's just like a sexy guy, and you get distracted by him. And the thing is, if you go into Grandma's house after you're distracted, you'll have this semi-creepy first-person sequence. You go through the house and things just look a little off, and you'll hear sounds in the background that allude to what you were doing in the woods, or what might happen as a result. So like Red Riding Hood meets the wolf, and that's terrifying. Or like if you meet like the sexy guy, then you hear like sounds of what are probably people having sex and stuff like that. It's actually kind of interesting that like you're going off the path and you're disobedient, but like in a way you're growing as a person. Even though the things you encounter might be scary and possibly even harmful, it's still like part of life. So like, but the game's very short. again, like, you should know what you're getting if you plan on buying it, because if you're like, oh, cool, a video game, you're probably going to be disappointed, but it's cool for what it is.
Yeah. And let's see here. A big video game series is also based off of a Polish book series called the Witcher.
Yeah.
So if you don't know this, these are actually a pretty direct adaptation from those worlds. Apparently, it's a fair adaptation of those books, though.
I don't know if it adapts, how carefully it adapts the story, but apparently, like, in universe, like, it makes sense. Because I heard, like, at least there's a deviation, if not a whole separate thing with the video game series.
Gotcha.
And there's a bunch of books. I think only, like, a couple of them are translated, and I forgot if they were official or fan. But there are more books, and, like, we want them. So, like, we'll see if we translate them. I would hope that we do, because from what I've heard, the author of the books had made a deal, like, he was just like, oh, video games, no one's going to care, so he, like, just wanted to retain the right to the book or whatever. He didn't care about the video game royalties, and he took, like, some large, like, I think, upfront payment instead, and boy, did that bite him in the ass, and he's apparently, like, super salty about it.
Yeah, he's trying to sue CD Projekt Red, also the owners of GOG.
Yeah, and I think he doesn't really have much of a leg to stand on with this one.
No,
but he's just, like, really bitter about it, which is too bad, because, like, dude, you're not going to make Witcher video game money, but you can make more money if you bring your books over to the States. That'd be great.
Yeah, I think there might even be a copyright issue at this point too, because I think the video game company needs to be was involved in the original publication of those books just to kind of promote the video game. So he may not even have rights to the name The Witcher in the United States.
Oh, Jesus Christ!
Yeah, so it may even need to be sold as like a completely different named kind of
rough.
thing. And if it's done like that, he won't get nearly the attention.
Well, maybe he could, like, I mean, yeah, this still would be diminishing, but this is a stupid fucking title, but something with, like, The Adventures of Geralt, like a Rivera, or, you know, something like that.
I mean, geez, with the way that copywriting goes and copywritten material, he might actually have the rights to the character names either. Like, it may be even that bad.
Well, then again, though, I don't even know if Geralt's the main character in the books, or if he is. Like,
he is
not for long.
I don't know about the further adventures, but at least the main focus of the first couple books is.
Yeah, because I mean, he's certainly not the only Witcher. Like, that's been established.
But he
is a Witcher.
It's not called a Witcher. It's called the Witcher.
that is a good point.
But yeah, I mean, there are countless other video games as well that use popular culture icons like Agatha Christie's characters and Sherlock Holmes's in-game character or in-novel characters.
Yeah, sometimes they even use the direct names. Like the ABC Murders is an Agatha Christie video game, and that was the name of one of her stories.
Yeah, and there are plenty of Sherlock Holmes based video games. Some of them are adventure games. Other ones are just kind of like point and click, like
and both of those
like
make
find it
sense.
games.
Yeah,
find it games.
Every time I try to play the Jake Hunter games, I feel like this should have been from a book, but actually it is just like something that came out in Japan. It's just like it feels like I'm constantly surprised that this wasn't a totally like Eastern generated like game series.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know what's kind of cool about visual novels are like an actual like thing over there. So like instead of releasing a novel, you may just release a visual novel. And the Jake Hunter games don't really have much like failure state or anything like that. Right. They're really just trying to get you through the story.
There's a wider like spectrum over, especially in Japan, and China, Korea, where you can release a story as like a volume of manga, or as a light novel, or as an online novel, or as a visual novel, and depending upon it's intended to suit the kind of story that you want to tell, as opposed to like largely only being regarded as a serious writer if you're capable of expressing yourself in prose.
Yeah, yeah.
By the way, that would be the best Dracula adaptation, considering that the Dracula book is an epistolary novel, right? Everything that happened in that novel already happened because you're picking up letters from one person to another.
Yeah, and also other recording methods as well. So, one of the big things about the book was that it was showcasing the modern technology of the time, like things like telegrams and typewriters.
That's true.
And I believe wax recordings of people's voices.
Yeah, I think I actually remember a part in the book that said, like, you know, it was all modern, very 19th century. It just kind of cracked me up. But the thing with epistolary novels, though, is that, like, that was kind of the found footage movie of its time in that sense, right? Because everything that happened in the Blair Witch Project or Cloverfield, like, it's over. You're watching a recording. So, like, that's basically what that book was.
Yeah, it's pretty neat in that regard. You know, it kind of has a detective role of the consumer. You know.
Yeah. Like there's no actual mystery, but you're kind of like, well, let me see what happened.
Yeah. It's like you're picking up the pieces of something that of something that happened, and there will probably be missing artifacts to it that you have to piece together.
Yeah, there must have been a compilation because you have a letter from John, you have a letter from Mina. It's like they weren't just lying in the same place, so somebody must have put this stuff together to make this happen.
Mm-hmm. And then you have like pretty rote adaptations here of books. One of them that I wanted to mention was the Fighting Fantasy video game is actually based off of the Fighting Fantasy books. So I was actually talking to Lotus about this over the weekend, and these were games back in the 80s when Dungeons and Dragons was very popular. So what they did was they came up with choose your own adventure books had existed for a really long time, but what they did was they combined role playing with a choose your own adventure book, and has various states of winning and losing and based off of dice rolls. If you succeed with a 6, you move ahead to page 33 or whatever like that. And continue the story.
I've read like one of those books before. It was kind of cool.
So what the video game does is that it's pretty much the same thing, but it what it does is it allows you to have a random number generator, so you don't need a die. What you may not like about this, though, is that if you're just trying to move forward and you're having trouble with the random numbers, you may get frustrated with it and not realize there's no strategy to this game. You're just going through it until you get through it.
Like with the books, it was literally a roll of the dice.
Yeah. So I'm not entirely sold on that aspect of it. I think what makes the book version of it is the interactivity, but you actually take that interactivity of the dice roll away in the video game version. I mean, it's a small amount of interactivity, but you could see a child having fun with it.
Just a physical thing to do.
Exactly. It's not fun to press a button and get a random generator unless of course you get
6 every time.
The shiny Pikachu that you always wanted, but what I'm trying to say is the fun of it is not as well pronounced. So I don't think the video game version of it got very good reviews as a result. It's kind of a simplistic concept to begin with. Everybody knows that you could just kind of cheese your way through those books if you really wanted to. I'm not convinced that one works as an adaptation in particular. Before we move on to our regular segments, does anybody want to mention any last entries here that they really want to talk about?
So I've got a couple.
Please do.
I don't want. I guess we don't have the time to really go into depth on this, but I'd like to shout out the great Chinese novels which have spawned countless video game adaptations.
Sure.
I personally thought they were pretty interesting. I had read some of the books to try to understand my wife's culture since she's native born in China. And it definitely is kind of helpful to read the books and sort of internalize some of the things that traditional Chinese writers thought were important because that informs the culture moving forward. So that's Romance of the Three Kingdoms, Journey to the West, The Water Margin, which is what the Suikoden series is based off of, and also I think Bandit Kings of Ancient China, which was an NES game, or also MSX.
Romance of the Three Kingdoms was a ripoff of that one Magic the Gathering set.
Yes, Portal Three Kingdoms.
But Journey to the West, though, there have been actual like Journey to the West games like directly, but like probably the most famous adaptation is like Dragon Ball Z. Not Z, Dragon Ball, the original Dragon Ball.
Right.
There's that one Vice. What was the name of that one goofy ass PS1 game with the live action characters?
Oh, jeez.
Something Warriors.
It's gonna hit me, but
with the cheesy 80s music and the goofy everything.
I always think of Battle Monsters when I think of this,
but
it's not Battle Monsters.
But it's not that.
Yeah, it's another digitized fighter, but
with better sound, by the way. Yes. But that PS1 game that Mr. Ryu actually beat, which was amazing, and the credits were like guys in their costumes. It was great. I guess I want to mention, I haven't actually played this one, but Metro 2033 was based off of a Russian book of the same name. Mm-hmm. I can't really, unfortunately, I can't go into it more than that because I haven't played the game, but it's very like, not dystopian, but it's basically post-apocalyptic and sad and dealing with what like you have to work with. It's just very, very like oppressively. No, it's just an oppressive game. You're just like
kind of like real Russia.
My life. Post-apocalyptic Russia. But the other one is I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream. This is an interesting one because it's kind of an adaptation. Well, no, it's not really. It's not an adaptation of the short story. It's like a take on it. Because in the short story, you have these 5 characters who are in this like hell of the evil computer's own making, and they've just been tortured for the last something insane, like 106 or like 100-something years. And it's just like a miserable story of dealing with that shit. But apparently, at some point, somebody asked Harlan Ellison, Am killed the world, and you only have these 5 people left in it. Why these 5? And Ellison was like, I actually never thought about that. I just thought of the scenario. Huh. So in the video game, it's a point and click, and you're looking at these characters' pasts. I mean, none of these characters is like top 5 worst people in the world material by a long shot, but like they have their twisted histories that led them to this point, so it's interesting to see how it works. Also, the game has 2 endings where one of them ends on a less bleak note than the short story, and the other is the ending of the short story, to the point where, well, it's whatever character is left, but it's where the title gets its name from I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream. And depending which character you have left, you'll end with the same picture every time, but they'll each quote a different part of the end of the story that leads to the I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream line. So the true ending of the story is the bad ending in the game. Or I should say, the bad ending in the game is the true ending of the short story. Again, even the good ending is like, well, it's something. Yeah.
Oh, I've got sort of one last thing I just want to shout out as a little bit of trivia. So there actually was a very small independent game made off of the Pilgrim's Progress. Mm-hmm. And it was made by Scott Cawthon, the guy who does Five Nights at Freddy's. I didn't know this until like very recently, but he was like he had made like several like Christian themed.
Yeah, I was gonna say they were
biblical movies and games. Like yeah. So he made both a CGI movie and a game based off the Pilgrim's Progress.
Wow.
Sort of, and he inspired. So I learned this because there was like this meme video that was going around like quite some time ago. It features like this like blob looking guy singing a song in some like crappy 3D CGI movie. It's called like the Glob Galab Galab or something, and the song is like complete gibberish. And like I guess that's why you're supposed to laugh at it. But it was made by a guy who basically made an entire Christian themed CGI movie based on a novel because he was inspired by Scott Cawthon and his work making CGI movies and games.
Nice.
In the Christian community. So like that was actually pretty cool, and I learned a lot from like delving into that rabbit hole.
What's kind of funny is even Five Nights at Freddy itself, like Scott had made this like a more kid-friendly game with like these cute bears that looked kind of scary, like Freddy, and people were like, they're a little off-putting, dude, and that's kind of where Five Nights at Freddy's came from. He's like, let's make it purposely scary then.
That's the other thing. Like, there was a guy on my like YouTube subscription list who did a lot of like very, very in-depth analysis and like not tool-assisted speedruns, but personal self-imposed challenges on a lot of the really obscure Five Nights at Freddy's games, like the Five Nights at Freddy's World. The mobile game, and I was trying to figure out how he knew this, like how he got into this community, why he was so interested in it. And he was a minister. This guy at his day job when he wasn't a YouTube Let's Player. Sure. And I guess he had heard about Scott Cawthon through his ministry, like before he became a really big game developer.
Yeah.
So like he was really invested in like his success and like really into all the games that he put out.
Huh.
That's really neat. Pilgrim's Progress, is that a novel?
Yeah, it's a novel from like the 17th century. I want to say it's quite old.
Okay, so it's on the level of something like Paradise Lost or something like that.
Yeah, it's called Pilgrim's Progress from This World That Was to Come, a 1678 Christian allegory written by John Bunyan.
Huh.
Okay. I bet his feet were really tired after writing that.
No, I was gonna ask if he had a brother with like a giant blue bull.
I appreciate that you guys both made two entirely different
Bunyan jokes,
but equally asinine jokes.
Give her face a 3, but her ass a 9. It's my favorite.
Anyway,
my favorite Jeff Foxworthy jokes.
That's a pretty low bar.
You might be smarter than a 5th grader.
Maybe. So any last entries for this list for the good of the order?
Not really that I can think of.
There are plenty of others out there, some more rote than others, but I just wanted to explore this.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say, like, Call of Cthulhu is not a direct book adaptation. It comes kind of close to A Shadow over Innsmouth, but most of the Cthulhu games are, like, stuff that's from, like, Lovecraft stories.
Yeah.
But they're not often actual book adaptations.
We're at the stage where, like, Lovecraftian is a feel, not necessarily a direct interpretation of the book. It's a style.
Yeah, but Call of Cthulhu Dark Corners of the Earth was kind of close in its, like, early chapters of the game, and after that it went into a whole other thing, but the beginning was kind of like Shadow over Innsmouth. You got to stay in the motel for the night, and you're really not feeling it because this place is creepy as shit, and then you got to escape the place. Like, that was pretty on point.
Your cat has a very overtly racist name.
Yeah, we didn't quite do that, although we did have a guy who was complaining about hearing rats in the walls.
That is a good story.
That was like a one-off nod, but it's like, hey, I remember that from the story Rats in the Walls. Actually, wasn't that the story with the racist cat name?
Yes, it was, and it's also the first H.P. Lovecraft story I ever read. And I believe this one is not quite rats, obviously, but a primordial race of man that are performing like rituals in like a hidden city below the house.
Actually, one story I really liked was Pickman's Model, because
I don't know that one.
It's a good one. Like, Pickman has all these crazy abstract drawings, and like no one makes anything like makes art like that, and so he's getting fame as a quality artist. And it turns out he is a good artist, but he has zero creativity. He just has fucked up like this Lovecraftian creature just posing for him, and he's drawing it. It's just like, oh.
I want to mention real quickly here that if anybody is a Stephen King fan out there, Lotus and I in particular are, there is a H.P. Lovecraft style short story that he made in his early days that becomes important to his general lore later on, called Jerusalem's Lot. Which,
I was thinking a different story, but all right.
Well, Jerusalem's Lot is very much an H.P. Lovecraft story. It's his style emulated to a T. I definitely really enjoy that one, and eventually he makes and this one is based in the 1700s or something like that. And has a very similar character to what shows up in most H.P. Lovecraft stories. But eventually he made a novel called Salem's Lot, which is about the same town. It's just Salem is a a shortening of the same name with vampires, which is quite good.
The story I was thinking of was, I think it's just called like N, like the letter N, but it's about this super neurotic person who's doing all sorts of gestures with their hands, I think, and they're like checking these stones outside and counting them constantly and making sure like the number makes sense, even though why would it ever change? And this person just sounds fucking insane. But it turns out that they're doing it in order to like prevent a portal from worlds opening and like these horrible creatures coming out. And when the person finally dies, the guy who had observed them develops the neurosis and behavior, so like there is a legitimacy to this. So the only way to stop this behavior from happening would and prevent people from knowing about the portal, because knowing makes it weaker, would probably be to kill yourself and have nobody know why. But that's surprisingly hard to pull off.
That sounds great. Yeah, he was an H.P. Lovecraft fan before like it became really popular. He was the hipster of H.P. Lovecraft. He loved him back in the 60s and 70s, which is really interesting that he knew about him way back then. But yeah, anyway, any other ones for the good of the order here?
That's probably all I can think of at this point, I think.
Okay, you OldManStompy?
I'm good.
You're tapped out?
I'm tapped out.
Okay, great. So we'll move on here to our regular segments. I unfortunately did not weigh myself, and I probably didn't want to because it was Thanksgiving and I had 2 Thanksgiving dinners, right in a row. So I will return to doing that next week. I'm very much watching myself this week because I want to recover and not feel like I want to have a heavy meal anymore. I actually have been cooking a lot more lately, so I'm hoping to make an impact on my weight here.
All right, so for as far as fan responses, though, to last week's podcast, we have General Ledger talking about Stan Lee. So he says, a lot of Stan Lee's work challenged social conventions. The second X-Men team uplifted minorities and nationalities typically derided at the time. Iron Man tried to humanize the people behind industrialism in the Vietnam War. Hulk challenged the notion that the government and military are always the good guys. This carried to villains, too. Galactus is just trying to fulfill basic needs, and in spite of his villainy, Dr. Doom is a just and respectable ruler.
Yeah.
And Magneto's deeds are rooted in avoiding another genocide.
I was actually commenting. I was kind of alluding to that while we were talking about Doctor Doom. He's only a villain in the sense that he is like the rival of the main characters, like the Fantastic Four. But in his own country, like the people love him. He's not like really a despot.
There was actually an episode of the '90s Spider-Man cartoon that I found really fascinating. It was a multiple part, like it was like a 2 or 3 part episode, because it was like an adaptation of the Secret Wars. Obviously, it wasn't nearly as big as the actual Secret Wars, but like the Beyonder teleported. I think it was like
multiple Spider-Men in that version. I
think. Not that one. He took like 4 or 6 or something heroes and 4 or 6 villains and just beamed them to a planet and just waited to see what happened. So like Scorpion, I think, is over doing his thing and being a bad guy, and like Dr. Octopus is in like a research lab, and like. But then you see Dr. Doom, and he's already established, like, a government and order and everything, and it actually looks pretty good. It's just too bad. It was actually really fascinating to see. It's like, it's almost like the big reveal in The Shining, or not The Shining, in Silence of the Lambs, when you first meet Hannibal Lecter. Like, you're in this insane asylum where, this high-security prison, where these fucked up criminals are, and then you finally see Hannibal, and he's just like, good morning. And he's just hanging out, and you're like, oh, okay. And he's still the scariest guy of all, but like he comes off as really unassuming when you first see him. It's like, what?
And then you find out that he can convince another guy in another cell that can't even see him to kill himself.
Yeah, I know.
Just by talking to him.
Well, there was a scene in Monster, the manga and anime, where a guy like gets a whole room full of people to just start fighting each other like monsters because he's very charismatic. It's just like, Jesus Christ. But anyway, yeah, so very much like subversion of like social expectations in terms of a lot of Stan Lee's work. Now, Living Corpse is talking about what we said, if there were themes of, or excuse me, if there are scenes or even the whole attitude of video games contradict like their theme, like Fakafan had said, in Ogre Battle, it's all about bringing people together, but as far as a pragmatic perspective, you want to kill everyone you can to get their loot because it helps you. So Living Corpse says, you can beat a level perfectly, undetected, in Hitman or Splinter Cell, but the cutscene will show Agent 47 or Sam Fisher getting detected because of story reasons, which is frustrating. Like, at least when Metal Gear pulls off unavoidable story detection, it's in gameplay. Like, you know, the inevitable alarm in Metal Gear Solid 1 where you're escaping that tower. Like, so to get a perfect run in that game, you're only allowed like 2 or 3 detections, but those are the mandatory story detections.
Yeah,
so it's really kind of zero. But yeah, it really is frustrating when you actually flawlessly beat a level and it's like, but you were caught. It's like, oh, fuck you, man. Why didn't I just get caught at the start then? If it didn't matter. So as for our fan question, Carrick52 asks, are you more willing to put up with bad gameplay for good story, or vice versa?
We're the kings of this.
I know. I would argue bad gameplay as long as it doesn't make the game actually frustrating, like I'm having trouble playing the game, because I can put up with mediocre gameplay if there's something really interesting behind it all, but if there's a bad story, like, I really have to not care about the story. Like, if it's Doom, like, who gives a shit? It's fun killing stuff. Like, that's one
You're
thing.
on Mars, a portal to hell opened, have fun.
But if the game's really trying to do a story and it sucks, even if the gameplay's... Like, my go-to example is Resident Evil 5. I haven't played the games after that, but Resident Evil 5, at the time, had the best gameplay in any Resident Evil game. But I wasn't really enjoying myself because the story was fucking dumb. I know Resident Evil story is always, like, cheesy, but this, I just was not into it.
Yeah. Go ahead, OldManStompy.
So I would say that in terms of bad gameplay, if the story is good, the gameplay can't be boring, right? Like, it has to... Like, I know that there are idiosyncrasies in gameplay that don't bother me as much as they bother other people. I wouldn't necessarily call that bad gameplay. It just means that the part that's bad, you know, is not something that I judge very strongly when I'm playing a game. So, like, I don't think that I play games that are bad, you know, intentionally for a good story. I will definitely play games that are fun if the story is bad. The issue that I had with 4 Heroes of Light that I harp on all the time was that the story is actually, like, great. Like, the story is really interesting. But for one, and you know, this team went on to make Bravely Default, which also has like a really interesting story that plays with conventions and also has like a highly flawed gameplay loop. So I guess this is part of their thing. So like those
they made Octopath Traveler, didn't they?
I've also heard that's like deeply flawed for reasons pertaining to the gameplay.
Yeah. So that's the thing. If it's an RPG and it's like really frustrating to play, or it loops the game 100 times, like that's actually one of the flaws I heard about Skyward Sword. Is you go to the same dungeon like 3 times or whatever. It's like, god damn it. That's not so much gameplay necessarily. Like I mean, I guess it's when you're playing the game, but I tend to picture gameplay mechanics. But like, yeah, if you have to go through the same game like multiple times, it just feels like it's padding. So that could take my heart out of it. But at the same time, even if the gameplay is good, specifically if it's an RPG, like for me, a lot of the payoff is like getting to a boss and seeing how the plot develops from there. And if it's just not worth it, then that might turn me off to playing it further.
Go ahead.
No, continue.
What I was gonna say is, we're we're relatively positive in our reception of video games. So the three of us in particular will play a game if we like a certain aspect of it and put up with the rest.
Yeah, that's true.
It's one of those things where we're very much students of this medium, and we love it, and we love experiencing it, and a lot of times, we'll put up with poor gameplay decisions in order to experience a certain aesthetic or a certain story beat, or
Yeah, the aesthetic is an important thing too. Actually, even
yeah,
if the
a
story
certain
sucks,
style.
like even if the story sucks, I could forgive that if like you're in a fight that like I've never seen another game do before or something like that, where it's like, whoa, okay, this is what I came here for.
Yeah, and so I would say that, and vice versa. I mean, I'll put up with a game with a poor story if it has fun gameplay. I mean, plenty of arcade games are all about that. A fun game mechanic is definitely worth it. Worth it. Going through a stupid story. If you're having fun while playing the game, who gives a shit? So I would say that I'm good with either. It's mediocre games that I have the problem with, that don't have a distinct style, and also don't have an inventive gameplay mechanic. To me, playing something like a Call of Duty, like a main storyline, isn't very fun because they're not inventive with their mechanics. Those games are really good multiplayer games. I'm not going to bash those. I don't like them, but I get that end of it. I get why those are fun, but I don't really particularly think that the one player mode is good at all in these games, and it's because there's no artistic merit, and there's no gameplay innovation. So I don't think they're worth playing for those reasons. Now, something like the zombies mode is a lot of fun with a lot of other people, and they're meticulously designed. I'm not going to knock those things. Even if it's not my thing, I recognize it when I watch somebody else play it for sure. They're well crafted. But I'm not just gonna play Call of Duty Black Ops, for the story, because I don't think there's anything to it. But I will play, Killer 7, for instance, because the gameplay is not nearly as good as Black Ops, or a Call of Duty Black Ops game. Those games are well refined and
well, it's not as polished. I wouldn't necessarily say that it's bad.
No, but what I'm trying to say is from a purely objective level, the gameplay is better in those.
Well, I would say more user friendly.
Okay.
Like Killer 7, it has its way of doing things, but like when you want to fire at an enemy, you must stop and go into an aim screen, and like you can't move and shoot. So it's like, all right.
And there were other games that could do that at that time too. So it wasn't like it didn't have enough examples to go off of. It just decided it's a very idiosyncratic game in that way. But my point is that I'm more than willing to play that game over a Call of Duty game, because it has its own style. It's a unique product. It is interesting in the way that it tells its story. Its gameplay, while not having the mechanics down, it is completely unique in how it uses it. So therefore it is good in that sense. So yeah, I think that's what you were trying to allude to. So I love that game, and I'll continue to play that game for years down the line. Whereas a game, like I said, even like a thing like Resistance, those games are completely forgettable to me. I like Halo quite a bit, because I think the gameplay is good enough in the Halo games, where the mechanics are good and refined enough, and also unique enough, where I will go back and play those. So don't think I'm bashing first-person shooters in general, but I think the Resistance games, for instance, are are derivative of the Halo games. Like I think the Halo is where it's at, where it originates, and then Resistance tried to kind of ape off of that with a different style of aesthetic. But I think that's what I'm getting at here is that we just don't like the generic stuff. I mean, and it's the same with our movie taste, really.
Well, I would rather say that like fun is an emergent phenomenon. It doesn't necessarily like you can't always look at a game and say like this will be fun. A lot of games are not even designed to be fun, like horror games. The fun comes from like you interacting in some way with your personal experiences, it convolving with the experience the game is trying to sell you. Mm-hmm. In games like Call of Duty, like you said, most of that is multiplayer. So like there's not a lot of hooks for the game to give you a lot of like the NPCs in a Call of Duty game, like sometimes the story is pretty interesting. I've heard some of them are quite good and compelling. Yeah. Like on their own merit, but the gameplay is mostly just you shooting a bunch of faceless NPCs, and like it isn't particularly compelling. It's just there to be streamlined for like the true emergence of fun.
It's like GoldenEye and the N64, right? Like you know what the plot of the movie is, but like look at what the missions actually are. Like you're shooting goons.
So like for example, Pokemon Go is like a horrible Pokemon game, but it's a lot of fun if you have a community of people to play with. It still has that like discovery that they were trying to achieve when they set out to design a Pokemon game that you could play in real life. But like you'd never design a game like Pokemon Go as a single player game. Even Pokemon Let's Go isn't as bare bones as Pokemon Go, right?
Yeah, I think it's the same thing with Twitter. You stay for the shining beacons of what it was designed for, and try to put up with the rest, right?
Separate the wheat from the chaff.
Well, anyway, anything else for the good of the order for this episode?
I want to give a shout out. I know I crap a lot in 4 Heroes of Light, but I was just reminded in this conversation of a game called Eternal Sonata for the PS3.
Oh yeah, very beautiful game.
If not for the fact that like I can like throw some shade at Vice for being the one to personally recommend me 4 Heroes of Light, Eternal Sonata would be like way up there. It's like very relevant to this discussion because like the game, it's a tri-ace game, so the combat system is like a lot of fun, and like the world is beautiful, the music is great, the story and the dialogue are like garbage, like absolute fucking dreck. Like the characters, they monologue for like 20 minutes at a time, and I just want to fucking kill myself every time I listen to them talk. Like I mean obviously, so like the point is that it sort of reminds me of like Metal Gear Solid 2 when like the ending cutscene got so like long and like confusing.
Literally an hour and 20 minutes.
For a while I like stopped. I just like started playing a game on my DS and just like watched it. Like some of these RPGs, I can tolerate the bad story because I can just go do something else. I don't even really have to watch the cutscene. It helps to know what's going on, but But if I'm in the room, at least if something really big happens, like somebody dies or like a monster.
Well, Chopin dies. I can tell you that.
That's like literally the framing device of the game. So for those,
he's on his deathbed, and I just ruined it for you.
Yeah, for those not familiar with the game, Eternal Sonata is a game that takes place in Frédéric Chopin, the composer, his like dying dream as he lies in his bed, dying of I think tuberculosis at the age of 20-something, and he like visits this fantasy world where dying of a terminal illness gives you magical powers. Therefore, he's like one of the most powerful people on the planet.
What?
And they go on an adventure.
I knew it was a dream world, but I didn't know that.
The ending of I think like the main female lead is like also dying of an incurable illness, and she is just so fucking insufferable and pure that I can't stand her. Like if I could take her out of my party all the time, I could, but I can't because she's the lead. And I think like the ending of the game features like a monologue where like a slug and a frog tell you how to live your life to its fullest because you're gonna die someday, just like Frédéric Chopin. I'm just like, I don't fucking need this in my PS3 RPGs. Like, give me a break.
But yeah, what this game is actually known for is being one of the very first like HD JRPGs. So like and very much created like to show off the aesthetics of an HD console.
Mm-hmm.
So like it is very visually striking. Like the lighting is very very purposeful, and the color choices are very striking in that game. And it's such a shame that it's so fucking insufferable. Because like it was meant to be an aesthetic masterpiece, for sure.
Well, if there was like a slider from which they took points away from the storyline writing and put them into, graphic design, they definitely slammed that thing all the way to the fucking right.
Well, on that note, I think we should wrap up this shindig. That is the show for this week. We want to thank our fans who contributed questions. Living Corpse, you're really awesome. Please keep contributing questions here for us. Keep us supplied with awesome topics by submitting questions of your own via the YouTube and SoundCloud pages. While there, please give us thumbs ups, likes, and 5-star ratings on iTunes. It helps promote and spread awareness of the show, and any bit of encouragement helps keep the show going. You can also catch us on Tuesdays on our sister podcast, Reactive Consciousness, the in-depth look at this week in our lives. You can friend me as vysethebold on Steam, Xbox Live, PSN, Twitter, Battle.net, and Switch.
Mm-hmm. Oh wait, you said Living Corpse and General Ledger for the responses, right?
Oh yes.
Yeah, and Carrick was the question. Yes, excellent.
Okay. I got it wrong, but thank you for all the responses.
But General Ledger and Living Corpse are regular responders as well.
Oh, okay. Well, you know what? Keep responding. You're definitely helping us out.
Yeah, responses and questions are very much appreciated. And again, thank you, Carrick, for the question. So you can follow me on my YouTube channel, Lotus Prince. You can hit me up on Twitter at Lotus Prince. And finally, if you're interested in seeing my videos early, getting in on exclusive live streams, selecting upcoming games for me to Let's Play, or getting on a Discord chat with me and other patrons, then perhaps consider swinging by my Patreon account, which can be found at patreon.com/LotusPrince.
And you can find me as OldManStompy on most major gaming and social media networks. The rest of the time, I'll be reading Romance of the Three Kingdoms at home. I can't take the book with me on the bus or the train because my wife made a paper book cover for it and taped it to the book, where it's like written in big letters that the book is actually called The Romance of Epic Porn. So now I can't take it out of my house.
Damn.
Or at least I would attract some some attention that I probably don't want when I'm trying to go to work when I'm on the subway.
Wow. So I think that is our show. We will catch you next week.
On that note, yeah. Until next time, everyone.
Cheers.